What a beautiful day. It might be winter, but it feels like spring. Hopefully spring is coming early this year. We're in a leap year. As I mentioned earlier, every 7 out of 19 years in the Jewish calendar has an extra month. And the extra month is added at the end of the months of the year, which is the last month, which is Adar. So we have 2 Adars, but it complicates things sometimes. For example, if you have a yahrzeit, when do you celebrate it? In the first month or the second month of Adar? If you have a birthday, when do you celebrate it? But the biggest question, of course, brought up by the rabbis is about Purim. We all know that Friday was what we called Purim Katan, the small Purim, and Shabbat was Shushan Purim Katan. Why? Because Purim is celebrated not in the first month, but in the second month of Adar. And the question the rabbis ask is like this. We all know that in general, when it comes to good things and mitzvot and celebrations, we always never postpone it. The Jewish edict is always rush to do a mitzvah. So why would we put Purim in the second Adar and not in the first Adar when we could? And the answer the rabbis give in the Talmud is because we want to connect redemption to redemption, celebration to celebration. And since right after Adar comes Purim, so we wanted Passover, so we wanted that Purim, which was the redemption of the Jews in Persia, should be close to Passover, the redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt, the first and most important redemption. But the question, of course, is they're not similar. One is biblical, one is rabbinic. One happened thousands of years earlier through great miracles, and one happened through Mordechai and Esther, and through many more natural ways. So why do we connect the two? And the answer is very powerful. You see, when God took the Jews out of Egypt, He performed miraculous things for the Jewish people. He split the sea. He took a whole nation out of Egypt, something that was never able to happen. But when it came to Purim, the miracles happened through the people. Mordechai happened to be the advisor, the king. Mordechai happened to hear the plot that they wanted to kill the king, and he saved the king's life. Esther becomes the queen. And although there are miracles, it's all miracles that are coming through the people. And the reason why we connect the holiday of Purim to the holiday of Passover, when we want them to be next to each other, is a message to each and every one of us that we shouldn't wait for a miracle to happen by God, but we have to create the miracles. We have to make sure that they happen. We have to rise to the occasions. And I say this now because there's no question to all of us here that October 7th being the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but since October 7th, we have seen so many miracles created by human beings, literally from the day of October 7th, from people that saved hundreds of people's lives in miraculous ways, through every single day, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers fighting in Gaza and up north and in Judea and Samaria, creating unimaginable victories for the Jewish people that no one would have thought would have happened. And that's the message with Purim being right next to Passover. In your own lives, in the life of our communities, God wants you to make the miracle. God wants you to be part of that miraculous change, and you have the power to do it. There's an amazing story that I once heard about. The Tosher Rebbe was a Rebbe in Montreal, and in the late 1940s, early 1950s, someone shows up to his shul, a young man, and the guy says that he's moving to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is literally in the boondocks without any Jewish community. So the Tosher Rebbe says, why are you moving all the way there? Why don't you stay here in Montreal with the Jewish community? And he says, listen, he went through the Holocaust, he went through the camps, the concentration camps, but he ended up saving up money now to move here. He saved up $1,500. But as he was on the boat coming to Montreal, he had his envelope with $1,500 and someone stole it. Back then, $1,500 was a huge sum. And now he's penniless. And the only job he could find is the job in Halifax. And he says to the Rebbe, I hope you forgive me, but I'm going to have to move this. I could make a living. The Rebbe says, no problem, I understand, but could you just say for afternoon services which were coming up? The guy says, sure, at the afternoon services, someone sits next to him and is staring at him the whole time. And after the service, this guy goes over to the guy and says, why are you staring at me? He says, did you just come on a boat from Amsterdam? He says, yes. He says, I have to make a confession. I was sitting next to you. And it was so tempting coming from the war that I stole the $1,500 from you. I took your envelope, but I feel terrible and I want to give it back. Could you just wait here? And he comes running back 10 minutes later and he gives him an envelope. He says, here's $2,000, $500 is for the aggravation and $1,500 for what I took from you. The guy has this sum of money now, so he decides to stay in Montreal, as the Rebbe had told him. And the Rebbe introduces him to people. He ends up finding a lovely Jewish girl. He gets married. His kids go to the Jewish schools and are connected to the Jewish shuls, etc., etc. And he gets grandchildren. And one day, he gets a knock on his door. And what does he see? He sees the man who had stolen his $1,500 and had returned it to him with another $500. And the guy says, can I talk to you? And he says, listen, don't worry, you paid me back plus extra. There's no problems. This is years later, 40 years later. He says, no, I want to tell you something. You see, I was never on the boat from Amsterdam and I never took your money. But that day, the Tasher Rebbe came over to me and said, do me a favor. I want you to stand next to him by prayers and look at him intently. And when he tells you why you're staring at him, tell him that you took the money and give him this envelope I'm giving you. The Tasher Rebbe realized that he could save this guy. If he would have gone to Nova Scotia, would he be connected to his community, to his Judaism? Would he be able to build a family he would have been able to build? He wasn't sure. So the Tasher Rebbe created a miracle that God wants each and every one of us to create by giving them money, by helping this family build and have children and grandchildren that would continue in the way of Judaism. Now we know why we specifically have Purim in the second month of Adar, right near the Passover. So for us to be able to create miracles that resemble that which God does, because we become his messengers and make those miracles come alive. Have a great